Howdy ho there, folks. How are we doing today? Hopefully you're all doing absolutely peachy keen fantastic. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about right intention because I think it's really important to understand why we're doing what we're doing and how intention matters. Now look, they always say, or at least I've heard a bunch of people say, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's certainly true to a certain extent. You can intend to do the right thing and end up doing the wrong thing, but that's not really the most important thing. The most important thing is, at least for starting out on the spiritual path and growing on the spiritual path, is figuring out why you're doing what you're doing and what is your intention behind it. You got to think about like the Pharisees and back in Jesus's day. Jesus talks about like how people would basically go out and go pray in front of everybody to make sure that everyone saw them and to get as much adulation and stuff like that as possible. They weren't really interested in God or getting closer to God. What they were really interested in was having people see them and then, making sure that everyone knew, hey, look me, I'm so very humble and look at me, I pray. Oh, Lord, aren't I the blessed? That's not really what we're going for here. What we're going for is to try and get a closer relationship with God in our hearts, not just, going out and doing all this stuff. And you'll find that a lot of religion, while it can be important, if you look at it, it is a collection of beliefs and a collection of different ideas kind of shoved into one area, often influenced greatly by culture. And when you look at it, it's not simply, spontaneous, loving devotion or anything like that. It's stuff that's cultural. It's stuff that's, meant to be done in groups and things like that. And there's nothing that's necessarily wrong with that. But then we need to understand that there is a key essence here. The key essence of religion, the key essence of getting close to God is not the religion itself. It is, in fact, beyond the religion and stretches way beyond it. You see, if you're looking at mystics, you'll find that they often kind of break with tradition and they do things that, a traditional Muslim or a traditional Christian might just not do, or even a traditional Hindu. A traditional Hindu might say lots of prayers and do lots of rituals and things like that, but they're not necessarily doing it, strictly for the love of God. Often they're doing it because it's good karma or good merit. There's also people who are, simply a part of a community and feel the need to maintain their area in that community. So what we need to do is acknowledge that, yes, spiritual paths and religions can be important, they can help, but they're not ultimately the main important thing. The main important thing that we want is spiritual growth, is to get to be kinder, better, and also, closer to God, and to grow closer to God all the time, and always be trying to go along that path, no matter what's going on. But this is why it's important, yeah, prayer is a good thing, but what are you praying for and why? Yeah, meditation is a good thing, but it's easier and also better if you have a goal in mind in terms of, is there a reason you're doing it? Are you trying to calm the mind? Or are you trying to do anything like that? Now, the meditation itself, you can get into a bit of a tricky area where you can say that, necessarily speaking, the meditation itself does not have a goal. You are simply trying to meditate. But you can have goals in terms of, you're trying to do more meditation, or you're trying to get, you're trying to find a calmer mind by doing more of this, etc., etc. And, Zen practitioners would probably argue about whether or not you should have any goal in meditation at all, but, that's neither here nor there right this moment. What you also need to make sure you're doing is, when you do things, what is the intention behind it? Why are you doing what you're doing? In a much broader sense. For instance, we can talk about pleasure. There's nothing necessarily wrong with pleasure, but if you're doing things to chase after pleasure, to always be chasing after that next high, then, whatever the next thing is that's pleasing you, whether it's food, women, men, whatever, etc., etc. That's not the most important thing, and we shouldn't be focusing strictly on that as our goal. What we need to be doing more and more is trying to figure out what we can do to get closer to God, and of course to have that more everlasting happiness, not that temporary happiness. So you need to make some goals, and don't necessarily make goals like you would make goals for material life, where you're just I want to have a job where I make more money. Sure, that's fine, But like with a lot of goals, you need to have a little bit more intentionality. You need to know like what are you actually after. That's part of the reason why right intention is so important, because part of understanding right intention is knowing why you want to do what you're doing, what you're after, where you're after, what exactly makes what you're after more or less better for your spiritual path, things like that. And you also need to understand what exactly it is that you're striving for, not just because it helps with the right intentionality, but it also helps to keep you grounded. You see, by having the right intentions, more difficult things and more difficult paths can actually become easier. For instance, if your goal is simply to learn and to grow closer to God, that's a good goal to have. And it's also something that is easily more achieved each day, but not necessarily easily achieved in the end goal, where you can go, okay, well, by praying today, by doing puja today, by interacting in a positive way today, I'm doing that goal without necessarily, reaching the quote unquote end goal. And that's why it's kind of important to understand this and understand what exactly you're going for. And right intention, and part of the reason I'm going into right intention and I'm going through like the Eightfold Path is that I think the Eightfold Path is actually pretty useful on almost any spiritual path, really. The Noble Eightfold Path has a lot of really good advice embedded within it and a lot of really good ideas within it for like just living a truly spiritual life and living a better spiritual life and understanding why you're doing what you're doing and growth and all that. So I think that's part of the reason why I like it so much. And I think it's really great guide. And, even if you're a Christian, you can analyze a lot of the things that the Buddha says and you can kind of implement them. For instance, you say you're just doing your normal Christian prayers and stuff like that, but you can sit there and think about right intention and think about like, okay, what is my intention with this prayer? Is my intention with this prayer to, show that I'm doing the right thing and show that I'm a good part of this community, or is it to show that, or is it more like I'm trying to get, closer to God? What am I doing with this prayer? And I think that it's very important for us to do that. Another thing about right intention that is sometimes not mentioned as often as maybe it should be is that right intention is also important because it can help us stop doing things if we notice that we're doing something that's bad. If you have right intention and you're trying not to cause harm, your intention is not to cause harm, you can keep that in the back of your mind throughout the day. And if you suddenly have something that is causing harm, or you know that you're doing something that is, inadvertently hurting people, or if you can kind of break down and analyze your actions, you can see what actions are helpful on the path versus which ones are actually slowing you down and making your growth harder. And right intention is kind of the beginning of so many things in the spiritual path, and it's part of the reason that it's like the first part of the Eightfold Path, depending on which version exactly you see. But there's a reason for that, because right intention makes it so that everything else comes about. It's sort of like how we talked about the fourfold qualifications, like discernment and things like that are one of the more important parts of being able to do the rest of the path. Like it starts with discernment for a reason. And in discernment and right intention are actually interrelated in a way. You have to discern what is merely passing and what is not, like worth sitting there and keeping as your like ultimate goal versus what is more important to you and what will help you grow. And you need to be able to discern those two apart from each other and be able to separate these things so that you're not just glomming on to whatever the first thing is that comes along, or, like, oh, well, I'm not getting anywhere with this, but I'm not, we need to move on past certain things. And right intention and discernment come together to make it so that you can really have a much broader view of things, and I would say much more understanding of a lot of these things, and make it so that you can analyze your actions. because if you start with the intention, okay, what am I trying to achieve by doing XYZ? If you start with that, what you end up getting is a solid foundation to move on to anything else. Okay, every action now gets analyzed through the lens of right intention. Every bit of your spiritual growth gets analyzed through right intention, and you can kind of stop and think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And all of this, of course, is also connected to mindfulness. We need to be mindful of our actions and why we're doing things. Why are we trying so hard to, maintain certain kinds of lifestyle? Why are we trying so hard to maintain certain actions? Is this more beneficial or less beneficial on the spiritual path? What are we going for? And mindfulness helps us with right intention, specifically in that it makes it so that we understand what we're doing and we take the time to analyze our influences and why we're going after things. And with right intention, with right intention and mindfulness, we can use the mindfulness to analyze the action, and then we can use right intention to see, does this fit along with what our end goal is? Does this fit along with what we're trying to achieve? Or is it something that is actually holding us back? Is it something that is going to actually make things worse on the spiritual path for us? Because let's say we can talk about all kinds of different things. We can say, well, I'd like to have a couple of glasses of wine every night. Okay. Now, you're allowed to do that, and I'm not necessarily going to say you can't do that. But if we use right intention, we can see what is the intention behind drinking the wine. Why are we drinking the wine? Why are we engaged in this versus why are we engaged versus why would we not engage in it? Does this help us on the spiritual path, or does this kind of make things a little bit worse? And you can go through and analyze each and every one of your little actions if you really want to. But so there's obviously the beginner route, which is like some things become more obviously not as good as others. Like, the consumption of alcohol is not necessarily the most evil thing, sure. However, if you're really trying to get further on the path, intoxicants are one of the things that you should probably, examine what you're doing with them, why you're doing them. And in most cases, it's probably a good idea to not. But, that also doesn't necessarily mean that you're evil for doing it. I'm just saying that's a good one to look at. Anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to say. I think we need to focus on our intention, use our intention to ground ourselves so that every time we go out and we do different things and we do things on the spiritual path, by grounding ourselves in the right intention, we can see, okay, this is what our goal is. Here's why we're doing it. And we can analyze things and figure out what we want to do and what we don't want to do, what we want to encourage and what we don't want to encourage. And we also will, if we keep right intention in our heart and keep the intention to do good things in our heart, it makes it easier to do those things, because if we keep that in our heart and we keep reminding ourselves, it's easy to come back to that and always be trying to do more and more of the right thing. Know what I mean, Jimmy Dean? Anyway, I'm not going to hack at this dragon's leg for a while because it's going to take a little while, and without bleed this probably wouldn't be possible, but I wanted some souls so I could level up and do a fun faith build, and you guys will see more of that next time. Anyway, I love you, God loves you, and bye-bye, love you, bye, have a great one, and remember to keep the right intention in your heart. Okay, okay, bye-bye.